Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the prophet Joel. We're in chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 1 through 16. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 16 are a little intriguing, confusing even, and yet not so much because the message is clear. It's just understanding what particularly is being referred to might be a little difficult. My friend Tommy South, speaking of the book of Revelation, but this goes for apocalyptic literature in general, I think, has always said, we may not always know what it is describing, but we always know what it's about. The message is always clear, although the details can be a little elusive at times. So let's read verses 1 through 16. Verses 1 through 3 are in verse form, as are verses 9 through 16, but verses 4 through 8 are not. They're in prose. That's intriguing in itself. And this is God speaking directly, which also is intriguing. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom have scattered among the nations, and they divided up my land. They have also cast lots for my people, traded a boy for a harlot, sold a girl for wine, that they may drink. Moreover, what are you to me, O Tyre, Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you rendering me recompense? But if you do recompense me swiftly and speedily, I will return your recompense on your head. Since you have taken my silver and gold, brought my precious treasures to your temples, sold the sons of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them from their country, behold, I am going to arouse them from the place where you have sold them, and return your recompense on your head. Also, I will sell your sons and daughters into the hands of the sons of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabaeans, to a distant nation, for the Lord has spoken. Proclaim this among the nations, prepare a war, rouse the mighty men, let all the soldiers draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a mighty man. And hasten and come, all you surrounding nations. Gather yourselves there. Bring down, O Lord, your mighty ones. Let the nations be aroused, and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come tread, for the winepress is full, the vats overflow. Their wickedness is great. The multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near. In the valley of decision, the sun and moon glow dark, the stars lose their brightness, the Lord roars from Zion, utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth tremble, but the Lord is a refuge for his people, a stronghold to the sons of Israel. So many connections with so many other places in Scripture in this passage, and so many questions. In those days and at that time. For in those days and at that time, it seems to me that he's describing something that follows the coming of the Messiah and the sending of the Spirit. So what's he describing? He's describing the fact that the nations have not kept their responsibility to him, and therefore they will be judged. The valley of Jehoshaphat, Shaphat means to judge. Yeho or Yahweh, or it's Yahweh's name. God judges. Yahweh judges. Jehoshaphat, that's what it means. So this is the valley of judgment, and later on the valley of decision. This passage is heavily mined in the book of Revelation. So many of words and phrases and direct quotes in Revelation come from this passage right here. The nations have treated God's people badly, and therefore they are going to be judged for that. They have pillaged God's property, and they have treated God's people the way the Assyrians and the Babylonians have. The nations that are mentioned are the Greeks, the Philistines, and the Phoenicians. But some of these verses are applied directly to the Roman Empire by John in the Apocalypse, in the book of Revelation. What is he talking about? God's people are going to be ill-treated by nations whose contract with God, Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and following, is that they protect the innocent from the guilty. And they're not going to do that. They're going to treat God's people. Empire after empire will treat God's people unjustly and badly, and they will be judged for it. They will fall one after another. And in the end, God's people will have refuge in God alone, and they will experience an eternal glory because of God, which is described beginning in verse 17 that we'll talk about tomorrow. Beyond that, I don't know that we can get more specific in God's message. And why would we need to? Seriously. Why would we need to perversely try to figure this out like God has given us a puzzle to figure out whenever the message is absolutely clear? God's in control. The nations will not act righteously, and they will be judged. And God's people will find refuge in him and have eternal glory in him. Why do we need to know anything else but that? And that we know to be absolutely true. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 good minutes. We'll finish the prophet Joel next time.